Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Vipassanā. 464. Culla Kunala Jataka. Small of wit, etc. This birth will be given under the Kunala birth. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Vipassanā. 465. Bhadda Sala Jātaka. Who art thou, etc. This story the master told while dwelling in Jetavana, about doing good to one's kith and kin. At Savatthi in the house of Anathapindika, there was always unfailing food for 500 brethren, and the same with Visakha, and the king of Kosala. But in the king's palace, various and fine as was the fare given, no one was friendly to the brethren. The result was that the brethren never ate in the palace, but they took their food, and went off to eat it at the house of Anathapindika, or Visakha, or some other of their trusted friends. One day the king said, "A present has been brought. Take this to the brethren," and sent it to the refectory. An answer was brought that no brethren were there in the refectory. "Where are they gone?" he asked. "They were sitting in their friends' houses to eat," was the reply. So the king after his morning meal came into the master's presence and asked him, "Good sir, what is the best kind of food?" "The food of friendship is the best, great king," said he. "Even sour rice gruel given by a friend becomes sweet." "Well, sir, and with whom do the brethren find friendship? With their kindred, great king, or with the Sakya families?" Then the king thought, what if he were to make a Sakya girl his queen consort? Then the brethren would be his friends, as it were with their own kindred. So rising from his seat, he returned to the palace, and sent a message to Kapalavathu to this effect: "Please give me one of your daughters in marriage, for I wish to become connected with your family." On receipt of this message the Sakyas gathered together and deliberated. "We live in a place subject to the authority of the king of Kosala. If we refuse a daughter, he will be very angry, and if we give her, the custom of our clan will be broken. What are we to do?" Then Mahanama said to them, "Do not trouble about it. I have a daughter, named Vasapakatiya. Her mother is a slave woman, Nagamunda by name. She is some 16 years of age, of great beauty and auspicious prospects, and by her father's side noble. We will send her, as a girl nobly born." The Sakyas agreed, and sent for the messengers, and said they were willing to give a daughter of the clan, and that they might take her with them at once. But the messengers reflected, "These Sakyas are desperately proud, in matters of birth. Suppose they should send a girl who was not of them, and say that she was so? We will take none but one who eats along with them." So they replied, "Well, we will take her, but we will take one who eats along with you." The Sakyas assigned a lodging for the messengers, and then wondered what to do. Mahanama said, "Now do not trouble about it. I will find a way. At my mealtime bring in Vasapakatiya dressed up in her finery. Then just as I have taken one mouthful, produce a letter, and say, 'My lord, such a king has sent you a letter. Be pleased to hear his message at once.'" They agreed, and as he was taking his meal they dressed and adorned the maid. "Bring my daughter," said Mahanama, "and let her take food with me." "In a moment," said they, "as soon as she is properly adorned." And after a short delay they brought her in. Expecting to take food with her father, she dipped her hand into the same dish. Mahanama had taken one mouthful with her, and put it in his mouth, but just as he stretched out his hand for another, they brought him a letter saying, "My lord, such a king has sent a letter to you. Be pleased to hear his message at once." Said Mahanama, "Go on with your meal, my dear." And holding his right hand in the dish, with his left took the letter and looked at it. As he examined the message the maiden went on eating. When she had eaten, he washed his hand and rinsed out his mouth. The messengers were firmly convinced that she was his daughter, for they did not divine the secret. So Mahanama sent away his daughter in great pomp. The messengers brought her to Savatthi, and said that this maiden was the true-born daughter of Mahanama. The king was pleased, and caused the whole city to be decorated, and placed her upon a pile of treasure, and by a ceremonial sprinkling made her his chief queen. She was dear to the king, and beloved. In a short time the queen conceived, and the king caused the proper treatment to be used. And at the end of 10 months, she brought forth a son whose color was a golden brown. On the day of his naming, the king sent a message to his grandmother saying, "A son has been born to Vasapakatiya, daughter of the Sakya king. What shall his name be? Now the courtier who was charged with this message was slightly deaf, but he went and told the king's grandmother. When she heard it, she said, even when Vasapakatiya had never borne a son, she was more than all the world, and now she will be the king's darling. The deaf man did not hear the word darling aright, but thought she said Vidutaba. So back he went to the king, and told him that he was to name the prince Vidutaba. This, the king thought, must be some ancient family name, and so named him Vidutaba. After this the prince grew up treated as a prince should be. When he was at the age of 7 years, having observed how the other princes received presents of toy elephants and horses, and other toys from the family of their mother's fathers, the lad said to his mother, "Mother, the rest of them get presents from their mother's family, but no one sends me anything. Are you an orphan?" Then she replied, "My boy, your grandsires are the Sakya kings, but they live a long way off, and that is why they send you nothing." Again when he was 16 he said, "Mother, I want to see your father's family." "Don't speak of it, child," she said. "What will you do when you get there?" But though she put him off, he asked her again and again. At last his mother said, "Well, go then." So the lad got his father's consent, and set out with a number of followers. Vasapakatiya sent on a letter before him to this effect: "I am living here happily. Let not my masters tell him anything of the secret." But the Sakyas, on hearing of the coming of Vidutaba, sent off all their young children into the country. "It is impossible," said they, "to receive him with respect." When the prince arrived at Kapalavathu, the Sakyas had assembled in the royal rest house. The prince approached the rest house and waited. Then they said to him, "This is your mother's father, this is her brother," pointing them out. He walked from one to the other saluting them, but although he bowed to them till his back ached, not one of them vouchsafed a greeting. So he asked, "Why is it that none of you greet me?" The Sakyas replied, "My dear, the youngest princes are all in the country." Then they entertained him grandly. After a few days' stay, he set out for home with all his retinue. Just then a slave woman washed the seat which he had used in the rest house with milk water, saying insultingly, "Here's the seat where sat the son of Vasapakatiya, the slave girl." A man who had left his spear behind was just fetching it, when he overheard the abuse of Prince Vidutaba. He asked what it meant. He was told that Vasapakatiya was born of a slave to Mahanama the Sakya. This he told to the soldiers. A great uproar arose, all shouting, "Vasapakatiya is a slave woman's daughter, so they say." The prince heard it. "Yes," thought he, "let them pour milk water over the seat I sat in, to wash it. When I am king, I will wash the place with their heart's blood." When he returned to Savatthi, the courtiers told the whole matter to the king. The king was enraged against the Sakyas for giving him a slave's daughter to wife. He cut off all allowances made to Vasapakatiya and her son, and gave them only what is proper to be given to slave men and women. Some few days later the master came to the palace and took a seat. The king approached him, and with a greeting said, "Sir, I am told that your clansmen gave me a slave's daughter to wife. I have cut off their allowances, mother and son, and grant them only what slaves would get." Said the master, "The Sakyas have done wrong, O great king. If they gave any one, they ought to have given a girl of their own blood. But O king, this I say, Vasapakatiya is a king's daughter, and in the house of a noble king she has received the ceremonial sprinkling. Vidutaba too was begotten by a noble king. Wise men of old have said, what matters the mother's birth? The birth of the father is the measure." And to a poor wife, a picker of sticks, they gave the position of queen consort. And the son born of her obtained the sovereignty of Benares, 12 leagues in extent, and became King Kathavahana, the wood carrier. Whereupon he told him the story of the Kathahari birth. When the king heard this speech he was pleased, and saying to himself, "The father's birth is the measure of the man," he again gave mother and son the treatment suited to them. Now the king's commander-in-chief was a man named Bandhula. His wife Malika was barren, and he sent her away to Kusinara, telling her to return to her own family. "I will go," said she, "when I have saluted the master." She went to Jetavana, and greeting the Tathagata stood waiting on one side. "Where are you going?" he asked. She replied, "My husband has sent me home, sir." "Why?" asked the master. "I am barren, sir, I have no son." "If that is all," said he, "there is no reason why you should go. Return." She was much pleased, and saluting the master went home again. Her husband asked her why she had come back. She answered, "The Disabula sent me back, my lord." "Then," said the commander-in-chief, "the Tathagata must have seen good reason." The woman soon after conceived, and when her cravings began, told him of it. "What is it you want?" he asked. "My lord," said she, "I desire to go and bathe and drink the water of the tank in Visali city where the families of the kings get water for the ceremonial sprinkling." The commander-in-chief promised to try. Seizing his bow, strong as 1,000 bows, he put his wife in a chariot, and left Savatthi, and drove his chariot to Visali. Now at this time there lived close to the gate a Lichavi named Mahali, who had been educated by the same teacher as the king of Kosala's general Bandhula. This man was blind, and used to advise the Lichavis on all matters temporal and spiritual. Hearing the clatter of the chariot as it went over the threshold, he said, "The noise of the chariot of Bandhula the Malian. This day there will be fear for the Lichavis." By the tank there was set a strong guard, within and without. Above it was spread an iron net. Not even a bird could find room to get through. But the general, dismounting from his car, put the guards to flight with the blows of his sword, and burst through the iron network, and in the tank bathed his wife and gave her to drink of the water. Then after bathing himself, he set Malika in the chariot, and left the town, and went back by the way he came. The guards went, and told all to the Lichavis. Then were the kings of the Lichavis angry, and 500 of them, mounted in 500 chariots, departed to capture Bandhula the Malian. They informed Mahali of it, and he said, "Go not, for he will slay you all." But they said, "Nay, but we will go." Then if you come to a place where a well has sunk up to the nave, you must return. If you return not then, return back from that place when you hear the noise of a thunderbolt. If then you turn not, turn back from that place where you shall see a hole in front of your chariots. Go no further. But they did not turn back according to his word, but pursued on and on. Malika espied them and said, "There are chariots in sight, my lord." "Then tell me," said he, "when they all look like one chariot." When they all in a line looked like one, she said, "My lord, I see as it were the head of one chariot." "Take the reins then," said he, and gave the reins into her hand. He stood upright in the chariot, and strung his bow. The chariot will sank into the earth nave deep. The Lichavis came to the place and saw it, but turned not back. The other went on a little further, and twanged the bow string. Then came a noise as the noise of a thunderbolt. Yet even then they turned not, but pursued on and on. Bandhula stood up in the chariot and sped a shaft, and it cleft the heads of all the 500 chariots, and passed right through the 500 kings in the place where the girdle is fastened, and then buried itself in the earth. They not perceiving that they were wounded pursued still, shouting, "Stop, Hollowa, stop!" Bandhula stopped his chariot and said, "You are dead men, and I cannot fight with the dead." "What?" said they, "dead such as we now are." "Loose the girdle of the first man," said Bandhula. They loosed his girdle, and at the instant the girdle was loosed he fell dead. Then he said to them, "You are all of you in the same condition. Go to your homes, and set in order what should be ordered, and give your directions to your wives and families, and then doff your armor." They did so, and then all of them gave up the ghost. And Bandhula conveyed Malika to Savatthi. She bore twin sons 16 times in succession, and they were all mighty men and heroes, and became perfected in all manner of accomplishments. Each one of them had 1,000 men to attend him, and when they went with their father to wait on the king, they alone filled the courtyard of the palace to overflowing. One day some men who had been defeated in court on a false charge, seeing Bandhula approach, raised a great outcry, and informed him that the judges of the court had supported a false charge. So Bandhula went into the court, and judged the case, and gave each man his own. The crowd uttered loud shouts of applause. The king asked what it meant, and on hearing was much pleased. All those officers he sent away, and gave Bandhula charge of the judgment court, and thenceforward he judged aright. Then the former judges became poor, because they no longer received bribes, and they slandered Bandhula in the king's ear. accusing him of aiming at the kingdom himself. The king listened to their words, and could not control his suspicions. But, he reflected, if he be slain here, I shall be blamed. He suborned certain men to harry the frontier districts. Then sending for Bandhula, he said, the borders are in a blaze. Go with your sons and capture the brigands. With him he also sent other men sufficient, mighty men of war, with instructions to kill him and his 32 sons, and cut off their heads, and bring them back. While he was yet on the way, the hired brigands got wind of the general's coming, and took to flight. He settled the people of that district in their homes, and quieted the province, and set out for home. Then when he was not far from the city, those warriors cut off his head, and the heads of his sons. On that day Mallika had sent an invitation to the 2 chief disciples, along with 500 of the brethren. Early in the forenoon a letter was brought to her, with news that her husband and sons had lost their heads. When she heard this, without a word to a soul, she tucked the letter in her dress, and waited upon the company of the brethren. Her attendants had given rice to the brethren. When bringing in a bowl of ghee, they happened to break the bowl just in front of the elders. Then the captain of the faith said, pots are made to be broken. Do not trouble about it. The lady produced her letter from the fold of her dress, saying, here I have a letter informing me that my husband and his 32 sons have been beheaded. If I do not trouble about that, am I likely to trouble when a bowl is broken? The captain of the faith now began, unseen unknown, and so forth. Then rising from his seat uttered a discourse and went home. She summoned her 32 daughters-in-law, and to them said, your husbands, though innocent, have reaped the fruit of their former deeds. Do not you grieve, nor commit a sin of the soul worse even than the king's. This was her advice. The king's spies hearing this speech brought word to him that they were not angry. Then the king was distressed, and went to her dwelling, and craving pardon of Mallika and her sons' wives, offered a boon. She replied, be it accepted. She set out the funeral feast and bathed, and then went before the king. My lord, said she, you granted me a boon. I want nothing but this, that you permit my 32 daughters-in-law and me to go back to our own homes. The king consented. Each of her 32 sons' wives she sent away to her home, and herself returned to the home of her family in the city of Kusinara. And the king gave the post of commander-in-chief to one Dayakaryana, sister's son to the general Bandhula. But he went about picking faults in the king and saying, he murdered my uncle. Ever after the murder of the innocent Bandhula, the king was devoured by remorse, and had no peace of mind, felt no joy in being king. At that time the master dwelt near a country town of the Sakyas, named Yulumpa. Thither went the king, pitched a camp not far from the park, and with a few attendants went to the monastery to salute the master. The 5 symbols of royalty he handed to Karyana, and alone entered the perfumed chamber. All that followed must be described as in the Dhammasidya Sutta. When he entered the perfumed chamber, Karyana took those symbols of royalty, and made Vidutaba king. And leaving behind for the king 1 horse and a serving woman, he went to Savatthi. After a pleasant conversation with the master, the king on his return saw no army. He inquired of the woman, and learnt what had been done. Then set out for the city of Rajagaha, resolved to take his nephew with him, and capture Vidutaba. It was late when he came to the city, and the gates were shut, and lying down in a shed, exhausted by exposure to wind and sun, he died there. When the night began to grow brighter, the woman began to wail, my lord, the king of Kosala is past help. The sound was heard, and news came to the king. He performed the obsequies of his uncle with great magnificence. Vidutaba, once firmly established on the throne, remembered that grudge of his, and determined to destroy the Sakyas one and all, to which end he set out with a large army. That day at dawn the master, looking forth over the world, saw destruction threatening his kin. I must help my kindred, thought he. In the forenoon he went in search of alms, then after returning from his meal lay down lion, like in his perfumed chamber, and in the evening time, having passed through the air to a spot near Kapalavathu, sat beneath a tree that gave scanty shade. Hard by that place, a huge and shady banyan tree stood on the boundary of Vidutaba's realms. Vidutaba, seeing the master approached and saluting him, said, Why, sir, are sitting under so thin a tree in all this heat? "Sit beneath the shady banyan, sir." He replied, "Let be, O king. The shade of my kindred keeps me cool." The master, thought the other, must have come here to protect his clansmen. So he saluted the master, and returned again to Savatthi. And the master rising went to Jetavana. A second time the king called to mind his grudge against the Sakyas. A second time he set forth, and again saw the master seated in the same place, then again returned. A fourth time he set out, and the master, scanning the former deeds of the Sakyas, perceived that nothing could do away with the effect of their evil-doing, in casting poison into the river. So he did not go thither the fourth time. Then King Vidutaba slew all the Sakyas, beginning with babes at the breast, and with their heart's blood washed the bench and returned. On the day after the master had gone out for the third time and returned, he, having gone his rounds for alms, and his meal over, was resting in his perfumed chamber. The brethren gathered from all directions into the hall of truth, and seating themselves, began to tell of the virtues of the great being. Sirs, the master but showed himself, and turned the king back, and set free his kinsmen from fear of death. A helpful friend is the master to his clan. The master entered, and asked what they talked of as they sat there. They told him. Then he said, "Not now only, brethren, does the Tathagata act for the benefit of his kinsmen. He did the same long ago." With these words he told a story of the past. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta ruled as king in Benares, and observed the 10 royal virtues, he thought to himself, "All over India the kings live in palaces supported by many a column. There is no marvel, then, in a palace supported by many columns. But what if I make a palace with one column only to support it? Then I shall be the chiefest king of all kings." So he summoned his builders, and told them to build him a magnificent palace supported on one column. "Very good," said they, and away they went into the forest. There they beheld many a tree, straight and great, worthy to be the single column of such a palace. "Here are these trees," said they, "but the road is rough, and we can never transport them. We will go ask the king about it." When they did so, the king said, "By hook or by crook you must bring them, and that quickly." But they answered, "Neither by hook nor by crook can the thing be done." "Then," said the king, "search for a tree in my park." The builders went to the park, and there they espied a lordly sal tree, straight and well grown, worshipped by village and town. And to it the royal family also were wont to pay tribute and worship. And they told the king. Said the king, "In my park ye have found me a tree. Good, go and cut it down." "So be it," said they, and repaired to the park, with their hands full of perfumed garlands and the like. Then hanging upon it a 5-spray garland, and encircling it with a string, fastening to it a nosegay of flowers, and kindling a lamp, they did worship, explaining, "On the 7th day from now we shall cut down this tree. It is the king's command so to cut it down. Let the deities who dwell in this tree go elsewhither, and not unto us be the blame." The god who dwelt in the tree bearing this, thought to himself, "These builders are determined to cut down this tree, and to destroy my place of dwelling. Now my life only lasts as long as this my abiding place, and all the young sal trees that stand around this, where dwell the deities my kinsfolk, and they are many, will be destroyed. My own destruction does not touch me so near as the destruction of my children. Therefore I must protect their lives." Accordingly at the hour of midnight, adorned in divine splendor, he entered into the magnificent chamber of the king, and filling the whole chamber with a bright radiance, stood weeping beside the king's pillow. At sight of him the king, overcome by terror, uttered the first stanza. "Who art thou, standing high in air, with heavenly vesture swathed? Whence come thy fears? Why flow the tears in which thine eyes are bathed?" On hearing which the king of the gods repeated 2 stanzas. "Within thy realm, O king, they know me as the lucky tree. For 60,000 years I stood, and all have worshipped me. Though many a town and house they made, and many a king's dwelling, yet me they never did molest, to me no harm did bring. Then even as they did worship pay, so worship thou, O king." Then the king repeated 2 stanzas. "But such another mighty trunk I never yet did see. So fine a kind in girth and height, so thick and strong a tree. A lovely palace I will build, 1 column for support. There I will place thee to abide. Thy life shall not be short." On hearing this, the king of the gods repeated 2 stanzas. Since thou art bent to tear my body from me, cut me small, and cut me piecemeal limb from limb, O king, or not at all. Cut first the top, the middle next, then last the root of me. And if thou cut me so, O king, death will not painful be. Then the king repeated 2 stanzas. First hands and feet, then nose and ears, while yet the victim lives. And last of all the head let fall, a painful death this gives. A lucky tree, a woodland king, what pleasure couldst thou feel? Why, for what reason dost thou wish to be cut up piecemeal? Then the lucky tree answered by repeating 2 stanzas. The reason, and a reason 'tis full noble, why piecemeal I would be cut, O mighty king. Come listen while I tell. My kith and kin all prospering round me well sheltered grow. These I should crush by one huge fall, and great would be their woe. The king, hearing this, was much pleased. 'Tis a worthy god this, thought he. He does not wish that his kinsfolk should lose their dwelling place because he loses his. He acts for his kinsfolk's good. And he repeated the remaining stanza. O lucky tree, a woodland king, thy thoughts must noble be. Thou wouldst befriend thy kindred, so from fear I set thee free. The king of the gods, having discoursed to this king, then departed. And the king, being established according to his admonition, gave gifts and did other good deeds, till he went to fill the hosts of heaven. The master, having ended this discourse, said, Thus it is, brethren, that the Tathagata acts so as to do good to his kith and kin. And then he identified the birth. At that time Ananda was the king. The followers of the Buddha were the deities which were embodied in the young saplings of the sal tree. And I was myself lucky tree, the king of the gods. Stories of the Buddha's former births. Book 12 Dvadasanapada. 466, Samudda Vanija Jataka. Others so, etc. This story the master told while dwelling at Jetavana, about Devdatta, when he had gone down into hell, taking with him 500 families. Now Devdatta, when the chief disciples had gone away, taking his followers with them, being unable to swallow his pain, spat up hot blood from his mouth, and departed. Then, tormented by great agony, as he remembered the virtues of the Tathagata, he said to himself, I for 9 months have thought evil of the Tathagata. But in the master's heart is never a sinful thought for me. In the 80 chief elders is no malice towards me. By my own deeds that I have done I am become all forlorn, and I am renounced by the master, by the great elders, by Elder Rahula, chief of my family, and by all the royal clans of the Sakyas. I will go to the master, and reconcile myself with him. So beckoning to his followers, he caused himself to be carried in a litter, and traveling always by night made his way to the city of Kosala. Ananda the elder told the master, saying, Devdatta is coming, they say, to make his peace with you. Ananda, Devdatta shall not see me. Again, when he had arrived at the city of Savatthi, the elder told it to the master, and the blessed one replied as before. When he was at the gate of Jetavana, and moving towards the Jetavana lake, his sin came to a head. A fever arose in his body, and desiring to bathe and drink, he commanded them to let him out of the litter, that he might drink. No sooner had he alighted, and stood upon the ground, than before he could refresh himself the great earth gaped. A flame arose from the nethermost hell of Avicii, and surrounded him. Then he knew that his deeds of sin had come to a head, and remembering the virtues of the Tathagata, he repeated this stanza. With these my bones to that supremest being, marked with 100 lucky marks, all-seeing, God, more than God, who man's bull spirit tames. With all my soul to Buddha I am fleeing. But in the very act of taking refuge, he was doomed to the hell of Avicii, and there were 500 families of his attendants, which families following him reviled the Disabala, and abused him, and in the Avicii hell were born, they also. Thus he went to Avicii, taking with him 500 families. So one day they were talking in the hall of truth. Brother, the sinful Devdatta, through greed of gain, set his anger causelessly against the Supreme Buddha, and with no regard for the terrors of the future, with 500 families was doomed to hell. The master entering asked of what they were speaking. They told him. Said he, Brethren, Devdatta being greedy of gain and honor, had no eye for the terrors of the future. And in former times as now, regarding not the terrors of the future, he with his followers through greed of present happiness came to utter ruin. So saying, he told them a story of the past. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king of Benares, there stood near Benares a great town of carpenters, containing 1,000 families. The carpenters from this town used to profess that they would make a bed, or a chair, or a house, and after receiving a large advance from men's hands, they proved able to make nothing whatever. The people used to upbraid every carpenter they met with, and interfered with them. So those debtors were so much harassed that they could live there no longer. "Let us go into some foreign land," said they, "and find some place or other to dwell in." So to the forest they went. They cut down trees. They built a mighty ship, and launched her in the river, and took her away from that town. And at a distance of some 3/4 of a league they laid her up. Then in the middle of the night they returned to the town to fetch their families, whom they conveyed on board ship, and then proceeded in due course to the ocean. There they sailed at the wind's will, until they reached an island that lay in the midst of the sea. Now in that island grew wild all manner of plants and wild fruit trees, rice, sugar cane, banana, mango, rose apple, jack, coconut, and what not. There was another man who had been shipwrecked, and had taken possession of that island before them, and lived therein, eating the rice and enjoying the sugar cane and all the rest, by which he had grown stout and sturdy. Naked he went, and his hair and beard were grown long. The carpenters thought, "If yonder island is haunted of demons, we shall all perish, so we will explore it." Then 7 brave men and strong, arming them with the 5 kinds of weapons, disembarked and explored that island. At that moment the castaway had just broken his fast, and drunk of the juice of the sugar cane, and in high contentment was lying on his back in a lovely spot, cool in the shade on some sand which glistered like silver plate. And he was thinking, "No such happiness as this have they who dwell in India, that plough and sow. Better to me is this island than India." He sang for joy, and was at the height of bliss. The master, to explain how this castaway sang for joy and bliss, repeated the first stanza. "Others sow and others plough, living by the sweat o' the brow. In my realm they have no share. India, this is better far." The scouts who were exploring the isle caught the sound of his singing, and said, "It seems the voice of man that we hear. Let us make acquaintance with him." Following the sound, they came upon the man, but his aspect horrified them. "'Tis a goblin," they cried and put arrow to bow. When the man saw them, he was in fear of being wounded, so he called out, "I am no goblin, sirs, but a man. Spare my life." "What," said they, "do men go all naked and defenseless like you?" And asked him again and again, only to receive the same answer, that he was a man. At last they approached him, and all began to talk pleasantly together, and the newcomers asked how he came thither. The other told them the truth of it. "As a reward for your good deeds you have come hither," said he. "This is a first-rate island. No need here to work with your hands for a living, of rice and sugar cane, and all the rest. There is no end here, and all growing wild. You may live here without anxiety." "Is there nothing else," they asked, "to hinder our living here?" "No fear is there but this. The isle is haunted by demons, and the demons would be incensed to see the excretions of your bodies. So when you would relieve yourselves, dig a hole in the sand and hide it there. That is the only danger. There is no other. Only always be careful on this point." Then they took up their abode in the place. But among these 1,000 families there were 2 master workmen, one at the head of each 500 of them. And one of these was foolish and greedy of the best food, the other wise and not bent on getting the best of everything. In course of time, as they continued to dwell there, all grew stout and sturdy. Then they thought, "We have not been merry men this long time. We will make some toddy from the juice of the sugar cane." So they caused the strong drink to be made, and being drunken sang, danced, sported. Then in thoughtlessness relieved themselves here, there, and everywhere without hiding it, so that they made the island foul and disgusting. The deities were incensed because these men made their playing place all foul. "Shall we bring the sea over it?" they deliberated, "and cleanse the island? This is the dark fortnight. Now our gathering is broken up. Well, on the 15th day from now, at the first of the full moon, at the time of the moon's rising, we will bring up the sea and make an end of them all." Thus they fixed the day, At this a righteous deity who was one of them thought, I would not that these should perish before my eyes. So in his compassion, at the time when the men were sitting at their doors in pleasant converse, after their evening meal, he made the whole island one blaze of light, and adorned in all splendor stayed poised in the air towards the north, and spoke to them thus. O ye carpenters! The deities are wroth with you. Dwell no longer in this place, for in half a month from this time, the deities will bring up the sea, and destroy you one and all. Therefore flee from this place. And he repeated the second stanza. In thrice 5 days the moon will rise to view. Then from the sea a mighty flood is due, this mighty island to o'erwhelm. Then haste. Elsewhere take shelter, that it hurt not you. With this advice, he returned to his own place. He gone. Another comrade of his, a cruel god, thought, perhaps they will follow his advice and escape. I will prevent their going, and bring them all to utter destruction. So adorned in divine splendor, he made a great blaze of light over the whole place, and approaching them, remained poised in the air towards the south, as he asked, Has there been a god here? There has, was the reply. What did he tell you? They answered, Thus and thus, my lord. He then said, This god does not wish you to live here, and in anger speaks, Go not elsewhither, but stay even here. And with these words he repeated 2 stanzas. To me by many signs it is made clear, that mighty ocean flood of which you hear, shall never this great island overwhelm. Then take your pleasure, grieve not, never fear. Here you have lit upon a wide abode, full of all things to eat, of drink and food. I see no danger for you, come enjoy. Unto all generations this your good. Having thus in these 2 stanzas offered to relieve their anxiety, he departed. When he was gone, the foolish carpenter lifted up his voice, and paying no heed to the saying of the righteous deity, he cried, Let your honors listen to me, and addressed all the carpenters in the 5th stanza. That God, who from the southern quarter clear, cries out all safe, from him the truth we hear. Fear or fear not, the northern knows no wit. Why grieve then? Take your pleasure, never fear. On hearing him, the 500 carpenters who were greedy of good things inclined to the counsel of the foolish carpenter. But then the wise carpenter refused to hearken to his saying, and addressing the carpenters repeated 4 stanzas. While these 2 goblins gainst each other cry, one calling fear, and one security, Come hear my reed, lest soon and out of hand, ye all together perish utterly. Let us join all to build a mighty bark, a vessel stout, and place within this ark all fittings, if this southern spoke the truth, and the other said but folly off the mark. This vessel for us good at need shall be, nor will we leave this island continent. But if the northern god spake truthfully, the southern did but foolishness present. Then in the ship we all embark together, and where our safety lies all highest thither. Take not for best or worse what first you hear, but whoso lets all pass within the ear, and then deliberating takes the mean, that man to safest harborage will steer. After this he again said, Come now, let us follow the words of both the deities. Let us build a ship, and then if the words of the first be true, into that ship we will climb and depart. But if the words of the other be true, we will put the ship out of the way and dwell here. When he had thus spoken, said the foolish carpenter, Go to. You see a crocodile in a teacup. You are too slow. The first god spake in anger against us, the second in affection. If we leave this choicest of isles, whither shall we go? But if you needs must go, take your tail with you, and make your ship. We want no ship, we. The wise man with those that followed him, built a ship, and put all the fittings aboard, and he and the whole company stood in the ship. Then on the day of the full moon, at the time of moon rising, up front the ocean a wave arose, and knee-deep it swept over the whole island. The wise man, when he observed the rising of the wave, cast loose the ship. Those of the foolish carpenter's party, 500 families they were, sat still, saying to one another, A wave has arisen, to sweep over the island, but it will be no deeper. Then the ocean wave rose waist deep, man deep, deep as a palm tree, as 7 palm trees, and over the whole island it rolled. The wise man, fertile in resource, not snared by greed of good things, departed in safety. But the foolish carpenter, greedy of good things, not regarding the fear of the future, with 500 families was destroyed. The other 3 stanzas, full of instruction, illustrating this matter, are stanzas of the perfect wisdom. As through mid-ocean by the deeds they did, the traders scaped away in happiness, so wise men, comprehending what lies hid within the future, will no jot transgress. Fools in their folly, eaten up with greed, who future dangers do not comprehend, sink overwhelmed in face of present need. As these in mid-dayest ocean found their end, accomplish then the deed before the need. Let not lack hurt me of the needful thing, who timely do the necessary deed. Come time, come never into suffering. When the master had ended this discourse, he said, Not now for the first time, brethren, but formerly also, has Devdatta been ensnared by pleasures of the present, and without a look to the future, has come to destruction with all his companions. So saying, he identified the birth. At that time, Devdatta was the foolish carpenter, Kokalika was the unrighteous deity that stood in the southern region, Sariputta was the deity who stood in the northern part, and I was myself the wise carpenter. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Dvadasanapada. 467, Jataka. He that desires, etc. This story the master told while dwelling at Jetavana, about a certain Brahmin. A Brahmin, so they say, who dwelt at Savatthi, was felling trees on the bank of the Asuravati, in order to cultivate the land. The master, perceiving his destiny, when he visited Savatthi for alms, went out of his road to talk sweetly with him. What are you doing, Brahmin? He asked. O Gautama, said the man, I am cutting a space free for cultivation. Very good, he replied. Go on with your work, Brahmin. In the same manner the master came, and talked with him when the felled trunks were all away, and the man was clearing his acre, and again at ploughing time, and at making the little embanked squares for water. Now on the day of sowing the Brahmin said, Today, O Gautama, is my ploughing festival. When this corn is ripe, I will give alms in plenty to the order, with the Buddha at their head. The master accepted his offer, and went away. On another day he came, and saw the Brahmin watching the corn. What are you doing, Brahmin? Asked he. Watching the corn, O Gautama. Very good, Brahmin, said the master, and away he went. Then the Brahmin thought, How often Gautama the ascetic comes this way. Without doubt he wants food. Well, food I will give him. On the day when this thought came into his mind, when he went home, there he found the master come also. Thereat arose in the Brahmin a wondrous great confidence. By and by, when ripe was the corn, the Brahmin resolved, tomorrow he would reap the field. But while he lay in bed, in the upper reaches of the Asuravati the rain poured in buckets full. Down came a flood, and carried the whole crop away to the sea, so that not one stalk was left. When the flood subsided, and the Brahmin beheld the destruction of his crops, he had not the strength to stand, pressing his hand to his heart, for he was overcome with great sorrow. He went weeping home, and lay down lamenting. In the morning the master saw this Brahmin overwhelmed with his woe, and thought he, I will be the Brahmin's support. So next day, after his alms round in Savatthi, on his return from receipt of food, he sent the brethren back to their monastery, and himself with the junior who attended him visited the man's house. When the Brahmin heard of his coming, he took heart, thinking, My friend must be come for a kindly talk. He offered him a seat. The master entering sat upon the seat indicated, and asked, Why are you downhearted, Brahmin? What has happened to displease you? O Gautama, said the man, from the time that I cut down the trees on the bank of the Asuravati, you know what I have been doing. I have been going about, and promising gifts to you when that crop should be ripe. Now a flood has carried off the whole crop, away to the sea. Nothing is left at all. Grain has been destroyed to the amount of 100 wagon loads, and so I am deep in grief. Why, will what is lost come back for grieving? No, Gautama, that will it not. If that is so, why grieve? The wealth of beings in this world, or their corn, when they have it, and when it is gone, why gone it is. No composite thing but is subject to destruction. Do not brood over it. Thus comforting him, the master repeated the Kamma scripture as appropriate to his case. At the conclusion of the Kamma, the morning Brahmin was established in the fruit of the first path. The master having eased him of his pain, arose from his seat, and returned to the monastery. All the town heard how the master had found such a Brahmin pierced with the pangs of grief, had consoled him, and established him in the fruit of the first path. The brethren talked of it in the hall of truth. Here, sirs, the disabula made friends with the Brahmin, grew intimate, took his opportunity to declare the law to him, when pierced with the pangs of grief, eased him of pain, established him in the fruit of the first path. The master came in, and asked, What speak ye of, brethren, as ye sit here together? They told him. He replied, This is not the first time, brethren, I have cured his grief, but I did the same long, long ago. And with these words he told a story of the past. Once upon a time, Brahmadatta, king of Benares, had 2 sons. To the elder he gave the viceroyalty, the younger he made commander-in-chief. Afterwards, when Brahmadatta was dead, the courtiers were for making the elder son king by the ceremonial sprinkling. But he said, I care not for a kingdom, let my younger brother have it. They begged and besought him, but he would none of it, and the younger was sprinkled to be king. The elder cared not for the viceroyalty, or any such thing. And when they begged him to remain and feed on the fat of the land, Nay, quoth he, I have nothing to do in this city. And he departed from Benares. To the frontier he went, and dwelt with a rich merchant's family, working with his own hands. These after a while, learning that he was a king's son, would not allow him to work, but waited upon him as a prince should be attended. Now after a time the king's officers came to that village, for taking a survey of the fields. Then the merchant came to the prince and said, My lord, we support you. Will you send a letter to your younger brother, and procure for us remission of taxes? To this he agreed, and wrote as follows, I am living with the family of such a merchant. I pray you remit their taxes for my sake. The king consented, and so did. Thereupon all the villagers, and the people of the countryside, came to him and said, Get our taxes remitted, and we will pay taxes to you. For them too he sent his petition, and got the taxes remitted. After that the people paid their taxes to him. Then his receipts and honor were great, and with this greatness grew his covetousness also. So by degrees he asked for all the district, he asked for the office of viceroy, and the younger brother gave it all. Then as his greed kept growing, he was not content even with viceroyalty, and determined to seize the kingdom, to which end he set out with a host of people, and taking up a position outside the city, sent a letter to his younger brother, Give me the kingdom, or fight for it. The younger brother thought, This fool refused once kingdom, and viceroyalty and all. And now says he, I will take it by battle. If I slay him in battle, it will be my shame. What care I for being king? So he sent a message, I have no wish to fight. You may have the kingdom. The other accepted it, and made his younger brother viceroy. Thenceforward he ruled the kingdom, but so greedy was he, that one kingdom could not content him, but he craved for 2 kingdoms, then for 3, and yet saw no end to his greed. At that time Saka, king of the gods, looked abroad. Who are they, thought he, carefully tend their parents, who give alms and do good, who are in the power of greed? He perceived that this man was subject to greed. Yon fool, thought he, is not satisfied with being king of Benares. Well, I will teach him a lesson. So in the guise of a young Brahmin, he stood at the door of the palace, and sent in word, that at the door stood a clever young man. He was admitted, and wished victory to the king. Then the king said, Why have you come? Mighty king, he answered, I have a thing to say to you, but I desire privacy. By power of Saka. At that very instant the people retired. Then said the young man, O great king, I know 3 cities prosperous, thronged with men, strong in troops and horses. Of these by my own power I will obtain the lordship, and deliver it to you. But you must make no delaying, and go at once. The king, being full of covetise, gave his consent. But by Saka's power he was prevented from asking, Who are you? Whence come? And what are you to receive? So much Saka said, and then returned to the abode of the 33. Then the king summoned his courtiers, and thus addressed them, A youth has been here, promising to capture and give me the lordship of 3 kingdoms. Go look for him. Send the drum a beating about the city, assemble the army, make no delay, for I am about to take 3 kingdoms. O great king, they said. Did you offer hospitality to the young man? Or did you ask where he dwelt? No, no, I offered him no hospitality. I did not ask where he dwelt. Go and look for him. They searched but found him not. They informed the king. They could not in the whole city find the young man. On hearing this, the king became gloomy. The lordship over 3 cities is lost, he thought again and again. I am shorn of great glory. Doubtless the young man went away angry with me, that I gave him no money for his expenses, nor a place to dwell in. Then in his body, full of greed, a burning arose. As the body burnt, his bowels were moved to a bloody flux. As the food went in, so it came out. Physicians could not cure him. The king was exhausted. His illness was bruited abroad all through the city. At that time, the Bodhisattva had returned to his parents in Benares from Takasila. After mastering all branches of learning, he, hearing the news about the king, proceeded to the palace door, with intent to cure him, and sent in a message, that a young man was there ready to cure the king. The king said, Great and most renowned physicians known far and near, are not able to cure me. What can a young lad do? Pay his expenses, and let him depart. The young man made answer, I want no fee for my physic, but I will cure him. Let him simply and solely pay me the price of my remedy. When the king heard this, he agreed, and admitted him. The young man saluted the king. Fear nothing, O king, said he. I will cure you, do but tell me the origin of your disorder. The king answered in wrath, What is that to you? Make up your medicine. O great king, quoth he. It is the way of physicians, first to learn whence the disease arises, then to make a remedy to suit. Well, well, my son, said the king, and proceeded to tell the origin of the disease, beginning where that young man had come, and made his promise, that he would take and give to him the lordship over 3 cities. Thus, my son, the disease arose from greed, now cure it if you can. What, O king, quoth he, can you capture those cities by grieving? Why no, my son. Since that is so, why grieve, O great king? Everything, animate or inanimate, must pass away, and leave all behind, even its own body. Even should you obtain, rule over 4 cities, you could not at one time eat 4 plates of food, recline on 4 couches, wear 4 sets of robes. You ought not to be the slave of desire. For desire, when it increases, allows no release from the 4 states of suffering. Thus having admonished him, the great being declared the law in the following stanzas. He that desires a thing, and then this his desire fulfillment blesses, sure a glad-hearted man is he, because his wish he now possesses. He that desires a thing, and then this his desire fulfillment blesses, desires throng on him more and more, as thirst in time of heat oppresses. As in the horn kine, the horn with their growth larger grows. So, in a foolish undiscerning man, that nothing knows, while grows the man, the more and more grows thirst and craving grows. Give all the rice and corn on earth, slave men, and kine and horse. 'Tis not enough for one. This know, and keep a righteous course. A king that should subdue the whole world wide, the whole wide world up to the ocean bound, with this side of the sea unsatisfied, would crave what might beyond the sea be found. Brood on desires within the heart, content will ne'er arise. Who turns from these, and the true cure descries, he is content whom wisdom satisfies. Best to be full of wisdom, these no lust can set afire. Never the man with wisdom filled is slave unto desire. Crush your desires and little want, not greedy all to win. He that is like the sea is not burnt by desire within, but like a cobbler cuts the shoe according to the skin. For each desire that is let go a happiness is won. He that all happiness would have, must with all lust have done. But as the Bodhisattva was repeating these stanzas, his mind being concentrated on the king's white sunshade, there arose in him the mystic rapture attained through white light. The king on his part became whole and well. He arose in joy from his seat, and addressed him thus. When all those physicians could not heal me, a wise youth has made me whole by the medicine of his wisdom. And he then repeated the 10th stanza. 8 verses have you uttered, worth 1,000 pieces each. Take, O great Brahmin, take the sum, for sweet is this your speech. At which the great being repeated the 11th. For thousands, hundreds, million times a million not care I. As the last verse I uttered, in my heart desire did die. More and yet more delighted, The king recited the last stanza in praise of the great being. Wise and good is indeed this youth, all the lore of all worlds knowing. All desire in very truth is mother of misery by his showing. Great king, said the Bodhisattva, be circumspect and walk in righteousness. Thus admonishing the king, he passed through the air to Himalaya, and living the life of a recluse, while life lasted, cultivated the excellences, and became destined for the world of Brahma. This discourse ended, the master said, thus, brethren, in former days as now, I made this Brahmin whole. So saying, he identified the birth. At that time this Brahmin was the king, and I was the wise young man. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Dvadasanapada. 468. Janasanda Jataka. Thus spake, etc. This story the master told while dwelling at Jetavana, for the instruction of the king of Kosala. At one time, they say the king, intoxicated with power, and devoted to the pleasures of sin, held no court of justice, and grew remiss in attending upon the Buddha. One day he remembered the Disabala. Thought he, I must visit him. So after breaking his fast, he ascended his magnificent chariot, and proceeding to the monastery, greeted him and took a seat. How is it, great king, asked the Bodhisattva, that you have not showed yourself for so long? Oh, sir, replied the king, I have been so busy, that there has been no opportunity of waiting upon you. Great king, quoth he, not meet is it to neglect such as I am, who can give admonition, supreme Buddhas, dwelling too in a monastery in front. A king ought to rule vigilant in all kingly duties, to his subjects like mother or father, forsaking all evil courses, never omitting the 10 virtues of a king. When a king is righteous, those who surround him are righteous also. No marvel were it, in truth, if under my instruction you were to rule in righteousness. But wise men of old, even when there was no teacher to instruct them, by their own understanding established in the threefold practice of well-doing, declared the law to a great multitude of people, and with all their attendants went to swell the hosts of heaven. With these words, at his request, the master told a story of the past. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king in Benares, the Bodhisattva was born as son of his queen consort. They gave him the name of Prince Janasanda. Now when he came of age, and had returned from Takasila, where he had been educated in all accomplishments, the king gave a general pardon to all prisoners, and gave him the viceroyalty. Afterwards, when his father died, he became king, and then he caused to be built 6 almonries. At the 4 gates of the city, in the midst of it, and at the palace gate. There day by day he used to distribute 600,000 pieces of money, and stirred up all India with his almsgiving. The prison doors he opened for good and all. The places of execution he destroyed. All the world he protected with the 4 sorts of beneficence. He kept the 5 virtues, observed the holy fast day, and ruled in righteousness. From time to time he would gather together his subjects, and declare the law to them. Give alms, practice virtue, righteously follow your business and calling. Educate yourselves in the days of your youth, gain wealth. Do not behave like a village cheat or a dog. Be not harsh nor cruel. Do your duty in caring for mother and for father. In family life honor your elders. Thus he confirmed multitudes of people in good living. Once on the holy day, 15th of the fortnight, having undertaken to keep the holy day, he thought to himself, I will declare the law to the multitudes, for the continual increase of good and blessing to them, and to make them vigilant in their life. Then he caused the drum to beat, and beginning with the women of his own household, gathered together all the people of the city. In the courtyard of his palace he sat, on a splendid couch set apart, beneath a pavilion adorned with jewels, and declared the law in these words. O people of the city, to you I will declare the practices that will cause you suffering, and these which will not. Be vigilant, and hear with care and attention. The master opened his mouth, a precious jewel among mouths, full of truth, and with a voice sweet as honey explained this address of the king of Kosala. Thus spake King Janasanda, 10 things in truth there be, which if a man omit to do, he suffers presently. Not to have got nor gathered store in time, the heart torments. To think he sought no wealth before he afterwards repents. How hard is life for men untaught? He thinks repenting sore. That learning, which he now might use, he would not learn before. A slanderer once, dishonest once, a backbiter unkind. Cruel and harsh was I, good cause for sorrow now I find. A slayer was I, merciless, and to no creature gave. Contemptible, for this, quoth he, much sorrow now I have. When I had many wives, thinks he, to whom I owed their due, I left them for another's wife, which now I dearly rue. When plenteous store of food and drink there was, he sorrows sore. To think he never gave a gift in the old time before. He grieves to think that when he could, he would not care and tend. Mother and father, now grown old, their youth now at an end. To have slighted teacher, monitor or father who would try to gratify his every wish, causes deep misery. To have treated Brahmins with neglect, ascetics many a one, holy and learned in the past, makes him repent anon. Sweet is austerity performed, a good man honored well. That he did no such thing before, 'tis sad to have to tell. Who these 10 things in wisdom brings to full accomplishment, and to all men his duty does, will never need repent. Thus twice in the month did the great being discourse in the same way to the multitude. And the multitude, established in his admonition, fulfilled these 10 things, and became destined for heaven. When the master had ended this discourse, he said, Thus, O great king, wise men of old, untaught and from their own intelligence, declared the law, and established multitudes in the way to heaven. With these words he identified the birth. At that time the Buddha's followers were the people, and I was myself King Janasanda. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Vipassanā. 469, Maha Kanha Jātaka. A black hound, etc. This story the master told while dwelling at Jetavana, about living for the benefit of the world. One day, they say, the brethren as they sat in the hall of truth, were talking together. Sirs, one would say, the master, ever practicing friendship towards the multitudes of the people, has forsaken an agreeable abode, and lives just for the good of the world. He has attained supreme wisdom, yet of his own accord takes bowl and robe, and goes on a journey of 18 leagues or more. For the 5 elders he set a-rolling the wheel of the law. On the 5th day of the half-month he recited the Anatalakkhana scriptures, and bestowed sainthood upon them all. He went to Uruvela, and to the ascetics with matted hair, he showed miracles 3,000 and half a thousand, and persuaded them to join the order. At Gayasisa he recited the discourse upon fire, and bestowed sainthood upon 1,000 of these ascetics. To Mahakassapa, when he had gone forward 3 miles to meet him, after 3 discourses he gave the higher orders. All alone, after the noonday meal, he went a journey of 45 leagues, and then established in the fruit of the 3rd path Pukusa, a youth of very good birth. To meet Mahakappana he went forward a space of 2,000 leagues, and bestowed sainthood upon him. Alone, in the afternoon he went a journey of 30 leagues, and established in sainthood that cruel and harsh man Angulimala. 30 leagues also he traversed and established Alavaka in the fruit of the 1st path, and saved the prince. In the heaven of the 33 he dwelt 3 months, and taught full comprehension of the law to 800 millions of deities. To Brahma's world he went, and destroyed the false doctrine of Baka Brahma, and bestowed sainthood on 10,000 Brahmas. Every year he goes on pilgrimage in 3 districts, and to such men as are capable of receiving, he gives the refuges, the virtues, and the fruits of the different stages. He even acts for the good of snakes and garrula birds and the like in many ways. In such words they praise the goodness and worth of the Disabala's life, for the good of the world. The master came in, and asked what they talked of as they sat there? They told him. And no wonder, brethren, said he. I who now in my perfect wisdom would live for the world's good. Even I in the past, in the days of passion, lived for the good of the world. So saying he told a story of the past. Once upon a time, in the days of the supreme Buddha Kassapa, there reigned a king named Uzanara. It was a long time after the supreme Buddha Kassapa had declared the 4 truths, and liberated multitudes of people from bondage, and had been translated to swell the number of those who dwell in nirvana. And the religion had fallen into decay. The brethren gained their livelihood in the 21 unlawful ways. They associated with the sisters, and sons and daughters were born to them. Brethren forsook the duties of the brotherhood, and sisters forsook the duties of sisters. Lay brethren and sisters the duties of such. Brahmins did no longer the duties of a Brahmin. Men for the most part followed the 10 paths of evil doing, and as they died thus filled the hosts of all states of suffering. Then Saka, observing that no new deities came into being, looked abroad upon the world. And then he perceived how men were born into states of suffering, and that the religion of the Buddha had decayed. What shall I do now? He wondered that. Ah, I have it, thought he. I will scare and terrify mankind, and when I see they are terrified, I will console them, I will declare the law. I will restore religion which has decayed. I will make it last for another 1,000 years. With this resolve, he made the god Matali into the shape of a huge black hound, of pure breed, having 4 tusks as big as a plantain, horrible, with a hideous shape and a fat belly, as of a woman ready to be delivered of a child. Him fastening with 5-fold chain, and putting on him a red wreath, he led by a cord. Himself he put on a pair of yellow garments, and bound his hair behind his head, and donned a red wreath, taking a huge bow, fitted with bowstring of the color of coral, and twirling in his fingers a javelin tipped with adamant. He assumed the aspect of a forester, and descended at a spot 1 league away from the city. The world is doomed to destruction, is doomed to destruction, he called out thrice with a loud sound, so that he terrified the people. And when he reached the entering in of the city, he repeated the cry. The people on seeing the hound were frightened, and hasted into the city, and told the king what had happened. The king speedily caused the city gates to be closed. But Saka overleapt the wall, 18 cubits in height, and with his hound stood within the city. The people in terror ran away into the houses, and made the doors fast. Big Blackie gave chase to every man he saw, and scared them, and finally entered into the king's palace. The people who in their fright had taken refuge in the courtyard, ran into the palace and shut to the door. And as for the king, he with the ladies of his household went up on the terrace. Big Blackie raised his 4 feet, and putting them in at the window roared a great roar. The sound of his roaring reached from hell to the highest heaven. The whole universe was one great roar. The 3 great roars that were the loudest ever heard in India are these: the cry of King Pinaka in the Pinaka birth, the cry of the snake king Sudarsana in the Buradata birth, and this roar in the Maha Kanha birth, or the story of Big Blackie. The people were terrified and horrified, and not a man of them could say a word to Saka. The king plucked up heart, and approaching the window cried out to Saka, "Ho, huntsman! Why did your hound roar?" Quoth he, "The hound is hungry." "Well," said the king, "I will order some food to be given him." So he told them to give him his own food, and the food of all his household. The hound seemed to make but 1 mouthful of the whole, then roared again. Again the king put his question. "My hound is still hungry," was the reply. Then he had all the food of his elephants and horses, and so forth brought and given to him. This also he finished off all at once. And then the king had all the food in the city given him. He swallowed this in like manner, and roared again. Said the king, "This is no hound. Beyond all doubt he is a goblin. I will ask him wherefore he is come." So terrified with fear, he asked his question by repeating the first stanza. A black, black hound, with 5 cords bound, with fangs all white of hue, majestic, awful, mighty one, what makes he here with you? On hearing this, Saka repeated the second stanza. Not to hunt game the black hound came, but he shall be of use. To punish men Uzanara, when I shall let him loose. Then said the king, "What huntsman? Will the hound devour the flesh of all men, or of your enemies only?" "Only my enemies, great king." "And who are your enemies?" "Those, O king, who love unrighteousness and walk wickedly." "Describe them to us," he asked. And the king of the gods described them in the stanzas. When the false brethren, bowl in hand, in one robe clad shall choose, tonsured the plough to follow, then the black hound I will loose. When sisters of the order shall in single robe be found, tonsured, yet walking in the world, I will let loose the hound. What time ascetics, usurers protruding the upper lip, foul-toothed and filthy-haired shall be, the black hound I'll let slip. When Brahmins, skilled in sacred books and holy rites, shall use their skill to sacrifice for pelf, the black hound shall go loose. Whoso his parents now grown old, their youth now come to an end, would not maintain, although he might, gainst him the hound I'll send. Who to his parents now grown old, their youth now come to an end, cries fools are ye, gainst such as he the black hound I will send. When men go after others' wives of teacher, or of friend, sister of father, uncle's wife, the black hound I will send. When shield on shoulder, sword in hand, full armed as highwaymen, they take the road to kill and rob, I'll loose the black hound then. When widows' sons, with skin groomed white, in skill all useless found, strong-armed, shall quarrel and shall fight, then I will loose the hound. When men with hearts of evil full false and deceitful men, walk in and out the world about, I'll loose the black hound then. When he had thus spoken, these, said he, are my enemies, O king. And he made as though he would let the hound leap forth and devour all those who did the deeds of enemies. But as all the multitude was terror-struck, he held in the hound by the leash, and seemed as it were to fix him to the spot. Then putting off the disguise of a hunter, by his power he rose and poised himself in the air, all blazing as it appeared, and said, O great king, I am Saka, king of the gods. Seeing that the world was about to be destroyed, I came hither. Now indeed men as they die are filling the states of suffering, because their deeds are evil, and heaven is become empty. From henceforth I will know how to deal with the wicked, but do you be vigilant. Then having in 4 stanzas well worth remembering declared the law, and established the people in the virtues of liberality, he strengthened the waning power of religion, so that it lasted for yet another 1,000 years, and then with Matali returned to his own place. When the master had ended this discourse he added, Thus, brethren, in former times as now I have lived for the good of the world. And then he identified the birth. At that time Ananda was Matali, and I was Saka. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Vipassanā Pada. 470, Kosiya Jataka. The Kosiya birth will be given under the Suddhabhojana birth. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Vipassanā Pada. 471, Mendaka Jataka. The problem of Mendaka will be given under the Amaga birth. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Vipassanā Pada. 472, Maha Paduma Jataka. No king should, etc. This story the master told while dwelling in Jetavana, about Sinkamanavika, when the Disabala first attained supreme wisdom, after disciples had multiplied, and innumerable gods and men had been born into heavenly states, and the seeds of goodness had been cast abroad. Great honor was shown him, and great gifts given. The heretics were like fireflies after sunrise. No honors and no gifts had they. In the street they stood and cried out to the people, What, is the ascetic Gautama the Buddha? We are Buddhas also. Does that gift only bring great fruit, which is given to him? That which is given to us also has great fruit for you. Give to us also work for us. But cry as they would, no honor nor gifts they got. Then they came together in secret, and consulted. How can we cast a stain upon Gautama the ascetic in the face of men, and put an end to his honor and his gifts? Now there was at that time in Savatthi a certain sister, named Sinkamanavika. Passing fair she was, full of all grace, a very sylph. Rays of brilliancy shone forth from her body. Some one uttered a counsel of cruelty thus. By the help of Sinkamanavika, we will cast a stain upon the ascetic Gautama, and put an end to his honor and the gifts he receives. Yes, they all agreed. That is the way to do it. She came to the monastery of the heretics, and greeted them, and stood still. The heretics said nothing to her. She said, What blemish is there in me? 3 times I have greeted you. She said again, Sirs, what blemish is in me? Why do you not speak to me? They replied, Know you not, sister, that Gautama the ascetic is going about and doing us harm, cutting off all the honor and liberality that was shown us? I did not know it, sirs, but what can I do? If you wish us well, sister, by your own doing bring a stain upon the ascetic Gautama, and put an end to his honor and the gifts he receives." She replied, "Very good, sirs, leave that to me. Do not trouble about it." With these words she departed. After that, she used all a woman's skill in deceit. When the people of Savatthi had heard the law, and were coming away from Jetavana, she used to go towards Jetavana, clad in a robe dyed with cochineal, and with fragrant garlands in her hands. When anyone asked her, "Whither away at this hour?" she would reply, "What have you to do with my goings and comings?" She spent the night in the heretics' monastery, which was close by Jetavana, and when early in the morning, the lay associates of the order came forth from the city to pay their morning salutation, she would meet them as though she had spent the night in Jetavana, going towards the city. If anyone asked where she had stayed, she would answer, "What are my stayings and lodgings to you?" But after some 6 weeks she replied, "I spent the night in Jetavana, with Gautama the ascetic, in one fragrant cell." Then the unconverted began to wonder, could this be true or not? After 3 or 4 months, she bound bandages about her belly, and made it appear as though she were with child, and wrapped a red robe around her. Then she declared that she was with child by the ascetic Gautama, and made blind fools believe. After 8 or 9 months, she fastened about her pieces of wood in a bundle, and over all her red robe, hands, feet, and back she caused to be beaten with the jawbone of an ox, so as to produce swellings, and made as though all her senses were wearied. One evening, when the Tathagata was sitting on the splendid seat of preaching, and was preaching the law, she went among the congregation, and standing in front of the Tathagata said, "O great ascetic! You preach indeed to great multitudes. Sweet is your voice, and soft is the lip that covers your teeth. But you have got me with child, and my time is near. Yet you assign me no chamber for the childbirth. You give me no ghee nor oil. What you will not do yourself, you do not ask another of the lay associates to do, the king of Kosala, or Anathapindika, or Visakha the great lay sister. Why do you not tell one of them to do what is to be done for me? You know how to take your pleasure, but you do not know how to care for that which shall be born." So she reviled the Tathagata in the midst of the congregation, as one might try to besmirch the moon's face with a handful of filth. The Tathagata stopped his discourse, and crying like a lion in clarion tones, he said, "Sister, whether that which you have said be true or false, you know and I know only." "Yes, truly," said she. "This happened through something that you and I only know of." Just at that moment, Sakka's throne became hot. Reflecting, he perceived the reason. Sinkamanavaka is accusing the Tathagata of what is not true. Determined to clear up this matter, he came thither with 4 gods in his company. The gods took on them the shape of mice, and all at once gnawed through the cords that bound the bundle of wood. A wind puff blew up the robe she wore, and the bundle of wood was disclosed and fell at her feet. The toes of both her feet were cut off. The people cried out, "A witch is accusing the Supreme Buddha." They spat on her head, and drove her forth from Jetavana with staves and clods in their hands. And as she passed beyond the range of the Tathagata's vision, the great earth yawned and showed a huge cleft. Flames came up from the lowest hell, and she, enveloped in it as it were with a garment which her friends should wrap about her, fell to the lowest hell, and there was born again. The honor and receipts of the other heretics ceased. Those of the Disabala grew more abundantly. Next day they were conversing in the Hall of Truth. Brother Sinkamanavaka falsely accused the Supreme Buddha, great in virtue, worthy of all gifts, and she came to dire destruction. The master entered, and asked what they talked of, sitting there together. They told him. Said he, "Not now only, brethren, has this woman falsely accused me, and come to dire destruction, but it was the same before." So saying, he told a story of the past. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king of Benares, the Bodhisattva was born as the son of his chief queen, and for that his all-blessed countenance was like to a lotus full-blown. Paduma Kumara they named him, which is to say the lotus prince. When he grew up he was educated in all arts and accomplishments. Then his mother departed this life. The king took another consort, and appointed his son viceroy. After this the king, being about to set forth to quell a rising on the frontier, said to his consort, "Do you lady stay here, while I go forth to quell the frontier insurrection. But she replied, No, my lord, here I will not remain, but I will go with you. Then he showed her the danger which lay on the field of battle, adding to it this, Stay then here without vexation until my return, and I will give charge to Prince Paduma, that he be careful in all that should be done for you, and then I will go. So thus he did and departed. When he had scattered his enemies and pacified the country, he returned, and pitched his camp without the city. The Bodhisattva, learning of his father's return, adorned the city, and setting a watch over the royal palace, went forth alone to meet his father. The queen, observing the beauty of his appearance, became enamored of him. In taking leave of her, the Bodhisattva said, Can I do anything for you, mother? Mother, do you call me? Quoth she. She rose up and seized his hands, saying, Lie on my couch. Why? He asked. Just until the king comes, she said. Let us both enjoy the bliss of love. Mother, my mother you are, and you have a husband living. Such a thing was never before heard of, that a woman, a matron, should break the moral law in the way of fleshly lust. How can I do such a deed of pollution with you? Twice and thrice she besought him, and when he would not, said she, Then you refuse to do as I ask? Indeed I do refuse. Then I will speak to the king, and cause you to be beheaded. Do as you will, answered the great being, and he left her ashamed. Then in great terror she thought, If he tell the king first, there is no life for me. I must get speech of him first myself. Accordingly, leaving her food untouched, she donned a soiled robe, and made nail scratches upon her body, giving orders to her attendants, that what time the king should ask of the queen's whereabouts, he should be told she was ill. She lay down, making a pretense of illness. Now the king made solemn procession about the city right wise, and went up into his dwelling. When he saw her not, he asked, Where is the queen? She is ill, they said. He entered the state chamber, and asked her, What is amiss with you, lady? She made as though she heard nothing. Twice and yet thrice he asked, and then she answered, O great king, why do you ask? Be silent. Women that have a husband must be even as I am. Who has annoyed you? Said he. Tell me quickly, and I will have him beheaded. Whom did you leave behind you in this city, when you went away? Prince Paduma. And he, she went on, came into my room, and I said, My son, do not so, I am your mother. But say what I would, he cried, none is king here but I, and I will take you to my dwelling, and enjoy your love. Then he seized me by the hair of my head, and plucked it out again and again, and as I would not yield to his will, he wounded and beat me and departed. The king made no investigation, but furious as a serpent commanded his men, Go and bind Prince Paduma, and bring him to me. They went to his house, swarming as it were through the city, and bound him and beat him, bound his hands fast behind his back, put about his neck the garland of red flowers, making him a condemned criminal, and led him thither, beating him the while. It was clear to him that this was the queen's doing, and as he went along he cried out, Ho fellows! I am not one that has offended against the king. I am innocent. All the city was abubble with the news. They say the king is going to execute Prince Paduma, at the bidding of a woman. They flocked together, they fell at the prince's feet, lamenting with a great noise, You have not deserved this, my lord. At last they brought him before the king. At sight of him, the king could not restrain what was in his heart, and cried out, This fellow is no king, but he plays the king finely. My son he is, yet he has insulted the queen. Away with him, down with him over the thieves' cliff, make an end of him. But the prince said to his father, No such crime lies at my door, father. Do not kill me on a woman's word. The king would not listen to him. Then all those of the royal seraglio, in number 16,000, raised a great lamentation, saying, Dear Paduma, mighty prince, this dealing you have never deserved. And all the warrior chiefs and great magnates of the land, and all the attendant courtiers cried, My lord, the prince is a man of goodness and virtuous life, observes the traditions of his race, heir to the kingdom. Do not slay him at a woman's word, without a hearing. A king's duty it is to act with all circumspection. So saying, they repeated 7 stanzas. No king should punish an offense, and hear no pleas at all, not thoroughly sifting it himself in all points, great and small. The warrior chief who punishes a fault before he tries, is like a man born blind, who eats his food all bones and flies, who punishes the guiltless, and lets go the guilty knows, no more than one who blind upon a rugged highway goes. He who all this examines well, in things both great and small, and so administers, deserves to be the head of all. He that would set himself on high must not all gentle be, nor all severe, but both these things practice in company. Contempt the all gentle wins, and he that's all severe has wrath. So of the pair be well aware, and keep a middle path. Much can the angry man, O king, and much the knave can say, and therefore for a woman's sake thy son thou must not slay. But for all they could say in many ways the courtiers could not win him to do their bidding. The Bodhisattva also for all his beseeching, could not persuade him to listen. Nay, the king said, blind fool, away, down with him over the thieves' cliff, repeating the 8th stanza. One side the whole world stands, my queen on the other all alone. Yet her I cleave to, cast him down the cliff and get you gone. At these words, not one among the 16,000 women could remain unmoved, while all the populace stretched out their hands, and tore their hair, with lamentations. The king said, let these but try to prevent the throwing of this fellow over the cliff. And amidst his followers, though the crowd wailed around, he caused the prince to be seized, and cast down the precipice over heels head first. Then the deity that dwelt in the hill, by power of his own kindliness, comforted the prince, saying, fear not, Paduma. And in both hands he caught him, pressed him to his heart, sent a divine thrill through him, set him in the abode of the serpents of the 8 ranges, within the hood of the king of the serpents. The serpent king received the Bodhisattva into the abode of the serpents, and gave him the half of his own glory and state. There for 1 year he dwelt. Then he said, I would go back to the ways of men. Whither? They asked. To Himalaya, where I will live a religious life. The serpent king gave his consent. Taking him, he conveyed him to the place where men go to and fro, and gave him the requisites of the religious, and went back to his own place. So he proceeded to Himalaya, and embraced the religious life, and cultivated the faculty of ecstatic bliss. There he abode, feeding upon fruits and roots of the woodland. Now a certain wood ranger, who dwelt in Benares, came to that place, and recognized the great being. Are you not, he asked, the great Prince Paduma, my lord? Yes, sir, he replied. The other saluted him, and there for some days he remained. Then he returned to Benares and said to the king, your son, my lord, has embraced the religious life in the region of Himalaya, and lives in a hut of leaves. I have been staying with him, and thence I come. Have you seen him with your own eyes? Asked the king. Yes, my lord. The king with a great host went thither, and on the outskirts of the forest he pitched his camp. Then with his courtiers around him, went to salute the great being, who sat at the door of his hut of leaves, in all the glory of his golden form, and sat on one side. The courtiers also greeted him, and spoke pleasantly to him, and sat on one side. The Bodhisattva on his part invited the king to share his wild fruits, and talked pleasantly with him. Then said the king, my son, by me you were cast down a deep precipice, and how is it you are yet alive? Asking which, he repeated the 9th stanza. As into hell mouth, you were cast over a beetling hill. No succor, many palm trees deep, how are you living still? These are the remaining stanzas, and of the 5, taken alternately, 3 were spoken by the Bodhisattva, and 2 by the king. A serpent mighty, full of force, born on that mountain land, caught me within his coils, and so here safe from death I stand. Lo! I will take you back, O prince, to my own home again, and there, what is the wood to you? With blessing you shall reign. As who a hook has swallowed, and draws it forth all blood, drawn forth is happy, so I see in me this bliss and good. Why speak you thus about a hook? Why speak you thus of gore? Why speak about the drawing out? Come tell me, I implore. Lust is the hook. Fine elephants and horse by blood I show. These by renouncing I have drawn. This chieftain you must know. Thus, O great king, to be king is nothing to me. But do you see to it, that you break not the 10 royal virtues, but forsake evil-doing, and rule in righteousness. In those words the great being admonished the king. He with weeping and wailing departed. And on the way to his city he asked his courtiers, on whose account was it that I made a breach with a son so virtuous? They replied, the queens. Her the king caused to be seized, and cast headlong over the thieves' cliff, and entering his city ruled in righteousness. When the master had ended this discourse, he said, Thus, brethren, this woman maligned me in days of yore, and came to dire destruction. And then identified the birth by repeating the last stanza. Lady Sinka was my mother. Devdutta was my father. I was then the prince their son. Sariputta was the spirit. And the good snake, I declare it, was Ananda. I have done. Stories of the Buddha's Former Births. Book 12 Dvadasana Pada. 473. Mittamitta Jataka. How should the wise, etc. This story the master told while dwelling in Jetavana, about an upright courtier of the king of Kosala. This man, they say, was most useful to the king, and then the king bestowed on him great honor. The other courtiers, being unable to stomach him, accused him to the king of having done things to the king's hurt. The king made inquiry about him, and finding in him no fault, thought, I see no fault in the man. How can I know whether he be my friend or foe? Then he thought, no one, save the Tathagata, will be able to decide this question. I will go and ask him. So after he had broken his fast, he visited the master, and said, How can one tell, sir, of any man, whether he be friend or foe? Then the master replied, Wise men of old, O king, have pondered this problem, and have questioned the wise about it, and following their advice, have discovered the truth, and renouncing their enemies have paid attention to their friends. This said at his request, he told a story of the past. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king of Benares, the Bodhisattva was a courtier who advised him on things spiritual and things temporal. At that time, the rest slandered a certain courtier who was upright. The king, seeing no fault in him, asked the great being, Now in what can one tell friend or foe? Repeating the first stanza. How should the wise and prudent strive? How may discernment know? What deeds declare to eye or ear the man that is a foe? Then the great being repeated these 5 stanzas to explain the marks of an enemy. He smiles not when you see him, no welcome will he show. He will not turn his eyes that way, and answers you with no. Your enemies he honors, he cares not for your friends. Those who would praise your worth he stays, your slanderers commends. No secret tells he to you, your secret he betrays. Speaks never well of what you do, your wisdom will not praise. He joys not at your welfare, but at your evil fame. Should he receive some dainty, he thinks not of your name, nor pities you, nor cries aloud, Oh, had my friend the same. These are the 16 tokens by which a foe you see. These if a wise man sees or hears he knows his enemy. How should the wise and prudent strive? What will discernment lend? What deeds declare to eye and ear the man that is a friend? The other, thus questioned in these lines, recited the remaining stanzas. The absent he remembers, returned he will rejoice. Then in the height of his delight he greets you with his voice. Your foes he never honors, he loves to serve your friends. Those who would slander you he stays, who praise you he commends. He tells his secrets to you, your secret ne'er betrays. Speaks ever well of all you do, your wisdom loves to praise. He joys to hear your welfare, not in your evil fame. Should he receive some dainty, he straight thinks on your name, and pities you, and cries aloud, Oh, had my friend the same. These are the 16 tokens and friends established well, which if a wise man sees, or hears he can a true friend tell. The king, delighted at the speech of the great being, gave him the highest honor. The master, having ended this discourse, said, Thus, great king, this question arose in days of yore, even as now, and wise men said their say, By these 32 signs may friend or foe be known. With those words he identified the birth. At that time, Ananda was the king, and I myself was the wise courtier.